Welcome to another exciting episode of The Intellect, Youth with a Nation at Heart. My name is Daniel Adaja, and on this episode, we are having a conversation on the effect of Covid-19 in Nigeria. And joining me in this conversation is brand storyteller and managing partner at Nude XP, Olaoluwa Ogundeji.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good to have you.
Thank
you for joining us today. So we have seen that over time, this particular pandemic has revealed so much about the Nigerian economy and even our government. But there are a few issues we would like to highlight on today's episode. And the very first one would have to do with food security. And it is so important that everybody has food to eat. That is like the most important thing to help humans survive. And how much effect do you think that this particular pandemic has had on Nigeria's food security?
So prior to the COVID-19, the federal government had already put in place the border closure to further limit the goods that are being imported. Basically, we're not a manufacturing country. Having the COVID-19, the whole scare, it has sort of increased the level of panic buying. And most of the retailers have sort of taken advantage of that. So prices have skyrocketed over 50–70%, and which is not so good to the average Nigerians because their purchasing power, their pocket power is not so strong. A lot of people are already losing their jobs, or their jobs are even threatened at the moment. Also, you have the farmers in terms of the supply chain for these goods coming from different states. Not every state produces. So you have states where it can be, because a lot of them rely on road transportation to get the goods from one place to the other to states like Lagos. So that has really affected the supply because there's a huge demand of goods and of foods, and unfortunately that's not the case. But on the flip side, we would also like to appreciate some form of alliance between states like Lagos and Kebbi, where they came up with the initiative of the lake rice. So those have and now we have state governments and also the federal governments trying to give palliatives because they've realized that under the Maslow hierarchy of needs, food is the most basic necessity. And if you can't eat, you don't even have a strong immune system to fight the whole COVID virus. So it's a bittersweet tale or experience because there's so much scare or fear of going out, to the marketplaces where level of sanitation is not so good. And was it maybe a decade ago where we now began to realize that yes, we can have supermarkets, like several supermarkets coming up, but that's not our nature. We want to get the real produce. We go to the marketplaces. So it's a bit scary or worrisome that we haven't done enough in terms of preparing ourselves for such an incident. And unfortunately as well, our agricultural sector has really suffered because of several factors. One, a lot of banks, they're not accessible loans to a lot of paperwork about how things will be done, but in actual sense, no action or little action has actually been done. Providing the farmers with machineries that can make sure that they can produce much more, and also when they even do produce them, storing these goods, storage system is so faulty because we don't really have that. So before the goods come from a particular location to another one, some of the produce get damaged along the line, and we rely on road transportation and for transporting this for the logistics. So you realize that with the state government coming together to say there's going to be an interstate ban, and social distancing as well, that's going to limit how some of these goods or foods will go from one location to the other.
Even as much as that, I think one of the things the federal government and some state government made easy was they allowed the movement of food items from one state to the other. But one thing that kept surprising everybody was the fact that certain food items, the price were doubled or maybe 3 times the original price. Could there be any moral justification for the fact that food items are actually going up even in a time when there is a pandemic?
No, the only thing here we can see is that we Nigerians, we can be our own problem.
Okay.
We want to make quick money. So their ideally price of oil transportation, meaning oil, has really dropped drastically. Should that affect the price of transportation of those goods? Not necessarily, but because of, as I said, panic buying, so that sort of brings some form of greediness to the retailers. So it would cost them nothing. Already they have the supply, or they have them in storage. All they just do is, increase the price. We saw that even with the face mask, where something sells at a particular amount.
And hand sanitizer.
Yeah, and in the next week or so, it's 100% the exact amount or the actual amount. And it's really scary. It just really tells on how we as Nigerians are not empathetic to ourselves. The human emotional intelligence is it's so low, and it's a bit scary because any little thing, any opportunity to make money, we just jump on it, and it's worrisome. It's not.
It's a lot worrisome. This is still the intellect youth with the nation at heart, and the next point we'll talk about now is regards to the lack of proper data, and this has affected a whole lot, even to the issue of the palliative distribution, which was a major concern for a lot of Nigerians. And there were various suggestions on this particular issue of the lack of data and also the distribution of palliative, which are like very major concern, and they are sort of intertwined because you need to know the amount of people you're supposed to distribute to. Let's use Lagos for an example. Lagos is supposed to have a population, or has a population of about 20 million or more, and we are doing 5 persons in a household. It means you're looking at 4 million households and looking at how many palliatives were actually distributed. And their order starts with one family having maybe 9 children. How necessary is it for us now to look at how important this data collection is?
Yeah, so for proper planning in any developed country, I think it's important that one of the things they take into cognizance is that data. They get this data, sort of analyze it, after mining it, they analyze it, and you can do future projections on it or with it, especially with humans. One of the reasons you would see how we failed in terms of data gathering is the constant, I have to say that again one more time, constant traffic jam in Lagos that we're experiencing. Why? Because in the early 60s or 70s, when this road construction was happening, we didn't take into cognizance that there will be more cars on the road. There were less cars, more bikes on the road way back then. But now it's changed. And unfortunately, the last census we did was 2006. 2006, several people have died, several people have children, and even that, in a sense, was not so accurate in terms of the data they got then. And unfortunately, it is so scary how we do not really have a way of getting this data. Yes, they tried to do the identity card for us. Some people registered when it started till date. They haven't yet gotten it. Several years afterwards, and it's just sometimes I feel one of the things we need to look at is the government has to bring in the private sectors, those who are professionals in data gathering or who already have those data. A lot of us have mobile phones. In America, they have a social security number. It's tied to everything. You search for that, you can get a data hit on several people. Here, not is the case. Yes, they're trying to do that through that means, but a lot of us have mobile phones. Perhaps the government can decide to, partner or work with, the telcos to actually look at it and say, okay, this is a way you can identify 1 or 2 people through that. Some of us, not a lot of us, have bank accounts. So we have the BVN, which is also tied to a bank account, regardless of how many. So it's important that we look at data and realize that data mining and data analytics is really key. You look at NCDC every day by 10 p.m., several Nigerians are on Twitter trying to get the number of the latest COVID-infected people. Sadly, how many people, we see those statistics, but those are not the real data. Those are not the real statistics. Why? Because in a population of over 200 million people, only 15 or less than 16,000 people have been tested. 200 million to 16,000. And you tell us that, so this is the amount of people who have died from COVID-19. Less than 300 or less than 400, let me just use that. Unfortunately, in the real sense of it, there's several people who have been infected, several people have died. You have Bauchi State, who said in the last 14 days over 150 people have died. You have that surge in Kano State, several people have died. But, because of lack of data gathering, because of so without even data, you don't even know how many ventilators you need to prepare for. You don't even know how many testing kits that needs to be gotten. Because when you have that in a week, we need to test an X amount of people, and these people, but if the government wants us, well, they've privatized it now, but NEPA officials know at least every household.
Yeah, that's disco.
So, the discos, they know the distribution. So could the government also tie into their own data network to see, okay, how many houses, how many homes exist in Lagos State? How many homes exist in Alakwere? What is the estimated number? In case we need to reach out to them, if someone is affected in Ogudu, the GRA, what is the radar? How many people, how many places? Because it's not just taking them out and isolating them. No, the data would really show that there's a high level of chance that those who have been around them have also been infected. So how can you quarantine that, not just the house, but even the streets around it, so that you curb it? But unfortunately, no, we're not seeing that happen, and the numbers that are being projected to us are not the real thing. And data is not just telling us the numbers. There's several people who are dying. People are actually dying. They have names. It's not just limiting the data to 100 or 10. And we are, as humans, when you just hear figures, we are not associated, or we are not. It's different when you hear a name than a number. One person, but when you hear the full person's name, you get to know that, oh yes, this person is actually...
Okay, so now lack of preparedness is a major concern for Nigeria and maybe Africa at large, with the fact that nobody expected that this is what 2020 was going to look like. And it's a major concern for us as young people to understand how it's important to always prepare for times that we do not expect. And even in business, they say the same thing, you make plans for the days that would not be raining. So how has this particular pandemic exposed our lack of preparedness?
Wow. You look at our healthcare system, it has really deteriorated from inception till date. Our lack of preparedness has really shown that our healthcare system cannot handle such an issue. Our hospitals, that's why we even had to create a makeshift isolation center and all whatnot, and even get these goods. And it's not, we are just, I've come to realize we're not a proactive country. Our government, we're not proactive, we're rather reactive. You have countries like Singapore who had learned from past experience with the SARS they had in the early 2000s. They had put certain things in place. And right now, it sort of helped, well, in the initial phase where they had certain strategies to further curb the spread of the virus. And you see that in some other countries. But here, our healthcare system, our hospitals, even to the workers themselves, they're not really being paid properly, or they're not even being paid well. You have a strike, there's several strikes that have happened if we look back, medical doctors and medical practitioners and all. And it's really sad that that in itself is showing or is revealing itself. And in actual sense, no one can actually be prepared for this no matter what. Because why? Two key things. There's no cure yet and a vaccine. So if those are not in existence, then we're just sort of running blind. And it is also very scary because the numbers will keep increasing, and the hospital beds will be filled up. And it's, at the end of it all, clearly we're a reactive government. What are the next steps that these people, the government are actually going to take? It's really important. So there has to be some form of budget allocation for future development and all. It's important that the government needs to be proactive. They need to see things. So after the post-COVID, they need to reevaluate a lot of things, making sure that health workers are being paid properly, making sure that there's some form of security measures, and there's a strong reactive urgency when, so it's just like a fire incident happens in a house. What's the estimated time a fire truck would come from its station to that particular place? So we need to also look at that statistics to say, okay, if this sort of thing happens again, what are the major instances or what are the things we need to put in place? So do we need to further equip the hospitals in each local government to be a world standard? After the whole post-COVID, I was talking to a friend, after the whole post-COVID, what happens to these equipments that have been purchased or donated? We need to make sure that they do not go to private hospitals, but rather they need to be put back into the government hospitals, the public hospitals.
Yes.
So those are the things we need to start thinking about, conversations we need to start having. We can, and it's important. So it's from a top-down perspective. In terms of proactiveness, our government needs to be more proactive. They need to be more proactive. It can never be emphasized enough.
All right, thank you. So still moving on with this particular conversation on the intellects today, another particular aspect that has largely affected, although you emphasized a lot more on the health sector, is businesses. And this particular COVID-19 pandemic has exposed us to look at, to think differently when it comes to businesses. And that's why the conversation around doing business different is so important right now. And if you look at, a lot of people are moving for the corporate sector now, people that used to be in an office space and now have to work from home. How important is this particular experience or this evolution with regards to this pandemic, which this pandemic has brought, important for business people?
Well, it's a wake-up call. I always say there are two sides to a story. There's always opportunity and hardship. So when we have the flip switch, we realize that right now we are not necessarily in an industrialized, but it's not an industrial economy anymore. It's digitally driven. So the era of digitization has actually come to stay. We need to do business differently. It's a wake-up call. We're now in a digital economy or a digital society. And it is very, very important that both business owners and even the government sort of embrace, and even as individuals, we embrace that digital skill acquisition, because that's how we can survive in the 21st century. And I really believe that this has opened a lot of people's, it has opened up a lot of, closed conversations about how to transition from just being traditional to digital. You have several companies now having Zoom having Zoom meetings, very few, because of the social distance and all, people are working from home. Could that have happened, or could this conversation have happened? Imagine you telling your bank or whatever, your employer, that don't worry, I can work from home. They would look at you, and in Nigeria, no way, it won't happen. But guess what? It's happening now. Are they really raking in the numbers? Not necessarily, but eventually it's getting there. It's revealing that this is a possibility, this can happen. So it is to take that possibility as a reality, which we already are in right now, and further realize that what are the digital skills, or what are the assets, digital assets, that we need to harness, or we need to bring into our company. Do we need to have a workforce application in place? Do we, where workers can clock in and clock out, make invoicing and all whatnot? Do we need to have websites? Because people are not really coming to our offices. So have a virtual office. So it's important that companies need to do things differently. There was an instance where I watched a video of a driverless car going to deliver a pizza box to a client, to a customer, autonomous. But here in Nigeria, with the road and all, so it's even putting in place that infrastructure. There's a whole controversy about the whole 5G networks and all whatnot. But yes, we have 4G. What have we even done with it before we're even talking about the 5G? What are the things? Is there an IoT in place where the Internet of Things are happening, where everything is all interconnected to each other? All these things. Is there an infrastructure in terms of our technology to further help us gather data as the government, gather data from the citizens, register them, all these things. So even as business owners in the informal sectors, even if you're in the marketplace, nothing stops you from having your POS. Nothing stops you from having, your mobile banking app, where transactions can happen. Thank you very much. But just before we wrap up this conversation, I'd like to know, what are the specific lessons you have learned so far from this particular COVID-19 pandemic? I've come to realize, one, governance is hard, really hard. It's very difficult governing people, especially Nigerians. If I'm to use a very good word for it, we are quite resilient. But in actual sense, it means stubborn. We're very stubborn. We're very heady. I wish we had put in place a more strict measure during the first lockdown, which we've lost. That first 4 weeks, if the even if the military had come in and made sure that we stayed at home, a lot of us did not. A lot of us did not abide by those rules and regulations that were put in, and it's unfortunate that governance is really, really difficult. It's not for the faint-hearted. Number two, I've learned is in everything, always try to see the bright side or the other side. So there's always going to be two sides to a story.
Yes.
For others, job loss, but for others as well, there's job employment because they have some skill set. So innovate or die. It's important for you, whatever you do, even as an individual or as a company, you need to be innovative. You need to look at things differently, look at the world differently. And finally, it just really shows how much planning needs to be done post-COVID-19. And that bulk falls on the governments because they need to put in place certain things, especially in the healthcare sector. Not just that, even in the agricultural sector, in diversifying, because the diversification is also part of innovation. So they also need to look at those areas to further make sure that, we are a self-sufficient government. Already as citizens, we're self-sufficient to an extent. We generate our own electricity. We pump our own water from the ground. We are our own security. We provide our own security to a large extent. So why can't the government also, imbibe some of our own traits and become self-sufficient, not depend on foreign importation?
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of The Intellect, and special thanks to our guest, Olaoluwa Ogundeji, for joining us today. And do not forget, for more information, log on to our website, www.theintellecttv.com.ng. Remember, for more information, you can follow us on all our social media platforms at The Intellect TV Show. Please do not forget to stay safe this time, and as much as possible, social distance, use hand sanitizers, wash your hands regularly, and also make sure you're putting on your nose masks.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for that tour. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Business Crest. My name is God Queen Aneke. As you all know, I'm here to season it all up with business advices as well as business gurus that you need to know and learn from. Well, ever heard about someone who is the financier of the revolution? Someone who served as the superintendent of finance of the United States? Someone who played a critical role in winning and securing America's independence, someone who traded flour and tobacco to France in exchange for war supplies such as powders, guns, blankets, etc. Well, if you don't know, I need you to go read about Robert Morris. Robert Morris is the first financier of the revolution. Till we meet again, guys, stay safe and please follow all our social media platforms down your screen. Bye.